I think he might try. I think he sees some benefit right now in holding out the prospect that the Israelis might go for it because he wants to strengthen Steve Witkoff's hand as he goes to Oman this weekend. But when you really start to look at some of the factors that are going Israel's way, today, just this morning, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN watchdog group, declared Iran in breach of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That's the first time in 20 years that this has happened. That is significant around the globe. It's not that I think Israel would be toasted if they were to bomb Iran, but it's sort of more understandable in the aftermath of this than it would be otherwise, especially when you consider that the next step might be to refer this to the UN Security Council, which also would trigger additional sanctions from around the world. And if Iran gets out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty altogether, that could almost be an invitation for Israel to go for it.
Okay, so may provide Israel some cover, but at the same time, wouldn't those very same things you're talking about signal that the U.S. has no real hope of getting a nuclear deal with Iran when Iran is doing such things?
I think it's really, really tough because when you think about enrichment, our position is no enrichment in Iran. Their position is, this is one of our red lines that we can't give it up. And we're talking about a consortium. Could we do nuclear fuel rods somewhere else in the Middle East? And Iran, I think, is basically saying, no, it needs to be inside of our own territory. And I think that's why the talks have foundered so far.
So let's say this happens. Does the U.S. provide logistical support, actual hardware? What would be the relationship? Or do we sit back and watch this happen?
So this is the million-dollar question. Have we turned over already the types of munitions that the Israelis would need? Presumably, they would want the Moab, the mother of all bombs, other bunker busters. They would probably want some refueling help from the United States. But what they really need is what we did the last two times there were missiles and drones going between the two countries. They need the U.S. Navy out there with Aegis destroyers knocking down some of these Iranian incoming. And I don't know if President Trump is ready to do these three things. Now, the Israelis may go for it anyway. They're famously creative and think pager operation and a million other things. So they may not need the bunker buster, or they may have an alternative plan. But these are some big question marks.
Well, and as you bring us back to what we've seen in the past when Iran has sent drones and missiles toward Israel, those were largely intercepted, not just with help of the U.S., but with Jordan as well. So when we consider the potential for Iranian retaliation here, is there some major damage that they actually can successfully inflict, considering they weren't successful in past iterations?
They might be able to get, presumably they would throw a lot more ballistic missiles and whatever into Israel, so it may well hit this time. But I think what they're really worried about, the United States in particular, is would the Iranians hit the Gulf allies of Israel and the United States? What would happen in Saudi Arabia? Remember, they hit Abqaiq last time, the big gigantic oil facility. They've also taken, at least the Houthis have taken shots in the UAE before. So I think the Iranians have signaled, you know what, if we get hit, don't think that it's just coming back at Israel. It may come also to your Gulf allies. So that's a big conflagration right there.
What do you make of the move in Iraq? We're trying to get U.S. personnel out of the way already. What is the target in Iraq that would be of value to Iran?
Well, just any place where there are concentrations of Americans in the Middle East that are within sort of
this
the
is more
gun
symbolic
sites.
than
It is. We have troops
case, right?
there. We have a bigger American presence, generally speaking. And so I think it's prudent for us to take non-essential personnel and give them the opportunity to leave. But it's it's something that we need to look at. It's a factor. It's a signal for thinking about, well, the United States is starting to take precautionary measures.
Well, and how far in advance do we typically take those? Does that signal that it could be within days what we're talking about here, before Sunday, before Witkoff even gets to Oman to try to deal with things diplomatically?
So I have a feeling that Trump has probably said to the Israelis, let Witkoff go in Sunday, but I think it's very, very soon. You know what? I think the Israelis are also operationally ready. They made a bunch of bombing runs down to hit the Houthi. The way I understand it is they're able to practice some refueling, certainly the distance that it takes to get down there, otherwise get into the nice right formations, have some operational readiness concerns addressed by that operation. So diplomatically, the air defenses being down in Israel, the military in Israel being really ready. You could read into this that something's going to happen soon.
You were Special Assistant for National Security in the George W. Bush administration. Would you be telling the president now that there's still an opportunity for a diplomatic solution, or prepare for war?
I would say prepare for war, but that is the moment at which you could have a diplomatic solution, when you got really, really close up to the line. So I would never rule it out completely, but I definitely think the United States needs to be thinking through, and apparently we are, what would the second, third order implications be of this type of strike? It would be big. Now, Israel has got a lot of creative ways to go after all these different sites across Iran, so this could be a really multi-day, maybe even multi-week type of operation.